Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Music Den. I'm your host, Armando Venditti. Hoping you guys are having a good day. And above all else, that you are looking after yourselves and one another. Today, ladies and gentlemen, before I get into the topic of what we hope to be another fantastic, insightful episode, I want to welcome back to the channel Mr. Ken Cheshire. How's it going, Ken?
Going well, Armando. Glad to be back talking about some good music.
There you go. There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with album anniversaries. Today we are looking at it's a combo episode. We are looking at albums that are celebrating their 60th and 50th anniversaries. Reason being, there's only one album that's celebrating its 60th anniversary, and we've got, I believe, five albums that are celebrating their 50th. So we decided to combine the two. And if this configuration on your screen looks a bit odd, that's because we're odd individuals. No, it's due to the fact that Jim Bricker, unfortunately, has been called away due to work responsibilities. So he graciously messaged us yesterday and said, "Carry on without me. I will put my head up out of the sand when I've done everything that I need to do work-wise, and I will reconvene with you and we'll carry on." So, Jim, we miss you. Look after yourself,
Yes,
and we'll talk to you very, very soon.
yes.
But on with the show. Ladies and gentlemen, we are looking at albums that are celebrating their 60th and 50th anniversaries. And as I call up my notes here, um, the first album on the list is celebrating its 60th anniversary. Fantastic piece of work. We are going to be looking at the album Maiden Voyage from one Herbie Hancock, released on May 17th, 1965, released on the Blue Note label, produced by Alfred Lyon, has a playing time of 42 minutes and 20 seconds and is listed under the genre of Moldo jazz. There are five tracks on the album in total. And looking at the uh, personnel on the album, the musicians who played on this album, holy shit, fantastic list of musicians. I will go
Yeah.
through it with you here as I go through my notes here. Um, we have Herbie Hancock on piano, Freddie Hubbard on trumpet, George Coleman on tenor saxophone, Ron Carter, Ron Carter, sorry, two coffees, I'm screwed up, on bass, and the one and only Tony Williams on drums. Now, if I'm not mistaken, all but one of these musicians went on to work with Herbie Hancock, sorry, Miles Davis, at
Mhm,
some, during
mhm.
later on in the late 60s to early 70s. There's only coffee in the mug, I promise you, ladies and gentlemen. But carry on with the show, and I will pass the virtual mic over to Ken, and he'll give us his take on Maiden Voyage. Take it away, Ken.
Well, thank you, boss. Yeah,
Boss.
this is a somewhat of a landmark album,
Yeah.
particularly for the title track. This track has been covered by so many artists. If you look it up on Wikipedia, you actually have to scroll down uh, quite a bit to see all the covers listed for this. And actually, it's a one made the song Maiden Voyage is the opening track, and it's really nice. This just sets up such a good opener. This album is rightfully so released on Blue Note,
Hmm.
um, which to me, when I see the Blue Note label, that's almost like a guarantee of good quality jazz. Of
Hmm.
course, there are exceptions, but a lot of that's just a matter of taste. I love Hancock's piano work on this. I've said several times on this channel that when it comes to jazz, piano is my favorite instrument. Um, and Hancock just, I don't, I feel like we don't hear much about Herbie these days. And
No, we don't.
yeah, and it's like let's give him a little bit of recognition here. Freddie Hubbard on trumpet is just fantastic. George Coleman on tenor sax is great. Um, Not being a big saxophone fan, um, I prefer Hubbard's contributions, but
Hmm.
huge respect to Coleman.
Hmm.
So, big respect. Of course, Ron Carter and Tony Williams, you don't get a rhythm section much better than that. Um,
Yeah.
so we got 5 tracks on this album. It's interesting. It opens up, like I said, with Maiden Voyage, which is very, very accessible to jazz fans and newbies to jazz too.
Yeah.
Just wonderful song. And then it goes into the Eye of the Hurricane,
Hmm.
um, which is goes into a little bit more of the abstract modal aspect of the
Yeah.
sound.
Yeah. In my notes, I have you for first of all, I like your description of Maiden Voyage. For me, like first of all, just quickly, the compositions are quite lengthy. I mean, they range from 5 minutes, just under 6 minutes at 5 minutes and 57 seconds to uh like just under 10 minutes, 9 minutes and 59
Yep.
seconds. So they're quite lengthy.
Yep.
I'm just gonna just to carry on
Sure.
with what you said. Uh,
Sure.
with the album overall, I find there's a lot of experimentation
Hmm.
on this album, a lot of flexing of the music muscles
Yes.
on this album, musical muscles on this album. In my notes for Maiden Voyage, I have the title track at 7 minutes and 53 seconds. I have in my notes great sax, beautiful dramatic piano on this, great dramatic cymbal crashes, and nice sweeping piano runs. Just gorgeous, you know, chords that he plays on this with Herbie Hancock. And yeah, it's just, and that carries on through the entire album.
Yes.
So for me, but carry on with what you were saying. My apologies. Oh,
Not it.
there we go.
So what's your take on Eye of the Hurricane
Um,
track?
I didn't hear what, sorry, you were muted there for a split second. So, okay.
Yeah. Ooh,
Um, for me with Eye of the Hurricane, I've got, great fast tempo. Again, a sense of experimentation. But to me, there's also a lot of space in the playing, very
yeah.
sparse. There's room for the instruments to breathe in terms of the um, just the notes they're playing and the sections that they're playing. Just
Right.
there's a lot of room
Right.
for again flexing of the musical muscles, as it were. So just great.
And it's tricky. It's sometimes very unusual to have that room in a song that is so heavily improvisational.
Yeah.
A lot of times songs that are highly improvisational, it just feels very busy or dense or whatever. Doesn't feel like there's much breathing room. Um,
Well,
Survival,
sorry, just to, I
yeah,
mean, just with what you just said, and I agree with you. I think that you run into that danger when you have, say, a lot of players on the session,
mhm,
because you don't know how far you can go with with your musical idea, right? Whether or
right,
not it's going to, uh, if it's going to sort of clash with what the other musicians want to do. So it's like you tend to sort of want to hold back a little bit, but
yeah,
with your ideas. But no,
yeah,
I get what you're saying.
yeah,
I get what you're saying.
yeah. And it's interesting for an album with 5 tracks, the middle three um, are heavy improvisational.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
however, the first and the fifth are not quite so much. There still is that element to it, but it's more to a form and not wide open. The third track, Little One, is maybe the heaviest in improvisation.
Yeah.
I found myself kind of wandering a little bit mentally while listening to it.
Yeah. Um, I tend to agree. I mean, it's, like clocks in like what, 8 minutes, 43 seconds. In my notes, I have, dramatic horns against subtle piano, underlying bass. The bass is very subtle in this track.
Yes.
It's not prominent. Dramatic piano stabs, room for soloing on this, and again, fantastic bass and beautiful piano
Yeah.
on this section, in this piece.
Yeah. And the label beautiful piano, applies to all five of these tracks. That's what
Yeah,
really stands out in my brain. Um,
yeah,
uh, Track four, Survival of the Fittest. Um, Really nice track. Um, Also very improvisational. It's
yeah,
interesting because I listen to some of these songs that are highly improvisational, and but the description of the album is modal jazz. And in these um, tracks 2 through 4, I don't quite hear the modal aspect of it as much as I do 1 and 5.
yeah, yeah.
But then
Yeah,
I'm not a jazz expert, so you know
yeah,
I'm I know what I like, and sometimes I can analyze why,
yeah,
sometimes not. Um, Sometimes it's just the way it hits, the way it resonates in your brain. And but none of these songs, Little One, Survival of the Fittest, and Track Four, I mean, yeah, Survival Track Four, they're not so far out there that they're not enjoyable.
yeah. No, I mean, with Survival of the Fittest, within that 9 minutes and 59 seconds, I mean, there is experimentation, there's a lot of energy, there's abandon,
Mhm.
a lot of freedom. Uh, there's a great drum solo
Yeah,
on that.
yeah,
And to me, I also put in my notes, there's also a simmering tension in the track,
good call. Yeah,
an underlying tension.
yeah,
And has a like no rules vibe to it. Like anything
yeah,
is good,
yes,
anything
yes.
is up for grabs. It has that kind of that feel to it, and it has a massive drum sound to my
Sure.
ears.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
great mix on the drums.
Tony Williams had to have been one of the most rock influenced jazz drummers I have ever heard in my life. I mean, all you had to do was give him two sticks and a drum
Sure.
stool, and you're like, okay, go. And he was like, oh, great, let's do this.
Well, yeah,
Um,
yeah, he was like a progenitor to Ginger Baker.
oh yeah, you could hear. I mean,
Absolutely.
definitely, definitely. No, and just to go back to what you said to complete the circle. I like the way you described this album because to me, even when you look at the cover,
Hmm.
you see Herbie Hancock on a boat. To
Yeah.
me, this is like somebody going on a journey,
Hmm.
right? Obviously on a boat, and it starts off very calm, and then you get into a lot of trouble, like through life, right? You go through your life experiences, right?
Yeah.
And then, there's a lot of bullshit that goes on in life, right? I mean, like, but then when you get to the last track, Dolphin Dance,
Yes.
you come out the other side of the storm.
Yes.
Maybe you've learned some experience, learned some
Yes.
lessons. Maybe you have
Yes.
some more lessons to learn, but
Yes.
you've come out on the other side of it, all the better for it.
That's right. That's right. You return to the peace in which you left,
That's exactly it. Well,
having ventured the storms, as you say. And it's interesting that yeah, Dolphin Dance is wonderful. And
oh yeah,
it's
yeah.
interesting. That's more of the form and tonality of the first track, Maiden Voyage. And it's interesting. I looked it up on Spotify. Maiden Voyage and Dolphin Dance, as far as the number of listens, far exceeds the listens to tracks 2, 3, and 4. So I'm not, there's no way I could tell if those clicks are from big jazz fans or people just dipping their toe in the waters or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
But it just shows that a little the songs on this album with a little bit more form and not quite so free form
yeah,
um, is greatly liked, but that doesn't diminish from the middle three tracks.
yeah,
So for Herbie Hancock, this is I think his fifth album that he was led, fifth or sixth album.
yeah,
It's yeah, and especially talking about the again the title track. It's been covered so many times,
yeah,
and that's what I think really indicates a good song, not necessarily, or a great song, not necessarily uh, how popular the original is, but how many times it's covered to success.
yeah,
And
yeah. And
uh,
its influence is felt
yeah, I mean,
by a lot of
a good
people.
song covered by dozens and dozens of people, and
Hmm.
their covers are also very good. I
Hmm.
mean, the original material is just, it's just cracking good. So,
No, I
yeah,
agree. I agree. I mean,
Maiden Voyage, I'd give that a definite recommendation.
I would. I mean, there's five tracks. There, and the album as a playing time again of 42 minutes and 20 seconds. A lot goes on in that 42 minutes and 20 seconds. If you
Sure.
want an album that will take you on a musical journey, strap yourself in and
Yeah,
just be open to what you're about to hear.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
The only thing about this album that uh, it's not a complaint, but there's a trope in jazz that um, has multiple instruments. For instance, in this case, we're talking about trumpet and tenor sax,
Yeah.
where they will double one another in a melody. They're playing exactly the same thing through
Yeah, the same line. Yeah.
I just, yeah, I just find those passages sometimes uh, a little too I really can't even put a word to it. Just not quite as interesting, I guess. I
Okay.
mean, the melodies that they're playing are great, but they're playing the same thing. It's like, well, and there's
Hmm.
just and a little bit is okay, and can be fantastic. But I just felt that um, for me, there was just a little bit more of it on this than I would have liked to have heard.
You
So this is
mean
being very, very picky, but it's just the way, yeah,
what?
it's the way it struck me.
Okay, the way you're describing it to me, it almost sounds like you want to say it's too conventional.
I think what my brain is saying is it's maybe a little too cliche,
Oh,
but
too
this is
cliche. Okay.
but this is 1965, so
Hmm.
this is early in the development of this style of jazz.
Yeah.
So it's at the time it wasn't cliche at the time.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is
No, no,
just
no.
my ears listening 60 years later.
Yeah. No, that's fine. And that's fair. That's fair. And I mean, from Blue Note, Herbie Hancock would go on to sign with Warner Brothers.
Mhm.
And then, go on to, you think this is experimentation?
Oh yeah. Oh, I know.
Listen to his early Warner Brother albums, which I have, and then he would sign to Columbia, and I have the box set, the Columbia
Okay.
recordings of Herbie Hancock. Experimentation galore. So I mean, yeah, this is conventional compared to what he's going
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. I
But
agree. I
yeah,
agree.
but I mean, for for this album, I think he hit it out of the park.
Sure.
I think there are more hits than misses on this album, but
Oh, absolutely.
yeah. But again, just you have to be open to it.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we must carry on. That concludes albums celebrating their 60th anniversary. We are going to be moving on to albums that are celebrating their 50th anniversary. What a list. Okay. First on off the top of the list, we have James Taylor with Gorilla, released in May of 1975, recorded March 17th to April 24th, 1975, from Warner Brothers. Has a playing time of 38 minutes and 46 seconds. Produced by, sorry, Russ Tillman and Lenny Waronker, who would go on to work with such artists as Gordon Lightfoot and Prince, among others. Um, I'm going to pass the virtual mic back over to Ken, and because again, I was brought up right by my mama, and he's going to give us his take on Gorilla. Go ahead.
So, is it possible to go farther in the opposite direction of Herbie Hancock than this album?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. It would
I
have
don't
to
think
be
so.
Lawrence. It would have to be Lawrence Welk. Okay,
Yeah, with the bubble machine.
so
Go ahead. Yeah, it's true. It's true.
James Taylor's sixth album. Um, ooh, what to say about this? This was, um, oh man, he was so big at this time in '75. Uh, the biggest hit off of this was the Holland Dozier Holland cover of "How Sweet It Is to Be Loved by You."
Yeah,
Uh, honestly, if I never heard that song again, it wouldn't be too soon. It's it's just too sweet, too sweet and sugary for me.
too
Um,
saccharine. Too saccharine.
yeah, Holland Dozier Holland, of course, wrote some of the biggest Motown songs of the '60s. Um, so I would much prefer to hear the Motown version of this. But anyway, the,
Yeah,
the album overall, we're talking basic yacht rock with very smooth harmonies and melodies. And that's what James Taylor was all about. Um, he was, oh, my wife just loved James Taylor, and I actually got to see him. Um, uh, uh, my wife wanted to go, so I bought tickets, and she got
mhm,
some of her friends to buy tickets too, and we went and saw him at the Civic Center, and it sounded fantastic. But
mhm.
and the rest of my party just absolutely just loved it. I kind of wish I'd have had I would have been sitting in a recliner. It was, it sounded good, but there just wasn't much to look at. Um, of course, we're not talking about Van Halen and or Kiss or anything like that with
Or
flash
King
mods.
Crimson. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But like I said, it sounded great, but uh, his stuff is just kind of, sitting back and chilling with a cold beverage, and that just sometimes I like my music a little more rocking, you know.
Yeah.
Not the title track, but the opening track, Mexico,
Mexico.
which was also a single,
Yeah.
um, is is really pretty good, and I find it an interesting song in that the way it pivots between two different keys
Yeah.
in a very unconventional way, and uh, so as a music student and um, musician, I always find song forms like that very interesting.
Okay.
And so I would love to have seen how that came about in his writing of that song. Um, I, whether it was all his idea to write the song that way, or if there was something
Yeah.
about the other musicians or the producer or whatever, because the musicians on this album is amazing. You've got Randy Newman,
Yeah.
um, uh,
Carly
David
Simon.
Grisman, Arthur
Yeah.
Davis. Leland Sklar on bass. Holy
Yes,
cow.
as the
Uh,
main player. Yeah, as the main
yeah,
bass
talk
player.
about overkill, for bass lines. You got David Sanborn, David Crosby on harmony vocals, Nash too, Carly Simon, Valerie Carter, all those on those harmonies, which are just excellent.
Yeah.
It's just the album is just a little too poppy for me. I enjoy it, but it's not something I would visit real often or very often.
Yeah,
There's
there. I mean, you want to talk about conventional? I mean,
sure.
I'm sorry. It's that's one. I'm listening to this album, and okay, Mexico, great song, great lead off track. The death knell for me is when you start doing covers. Um, there's no variety on this album. In terms of musical arrangement, in terms of style of music, it's very, yeah, yacht rock is the way to describe it. But there's no dynamics. There's no peaks and valleys. It just goes along very.
Yeah.
Sorry, get my hand up in the camera, like this, very
Well, it's
very level.
very
There's no,
formulaic.
yeah, it's and there's no, I don't know, like,
No dynamics.
yeah, there's no. That's the word. No
Yeah,
dynamics
it's
at
flat.
all. And I found myself, falling asleep listening to it. I could, it. Yeah, I need more variety. I'm not saying, um, I'm not saying, that there has to be thrashing guitars but just some sort of, just some bounce going on, like
Yes.
something to let me know that there's a
Yeah.
heartbeat going on here.
But
Um,
here, we're talking 75.
yes, yes,
And that formula, let's face it, it peaked at number 6 on the US Billboard
yes.
and number 2 in Canada. So, like I said, the formula was working.
Oh
We've
yeah.
talked about artists that found a formula and stuck with it. Uh, Particularly, we mentioned several times Phil Collins,
Okay.
where we
Yeah.
loved his first album, but after that, it was just like diminishing returns because he stayed with that formula,
Yeah.
until he would
Yeah.
go to his big band album or something.
And that's true. Every Phil Collins album after Face Value sold a little less, a little, like, as the years went on. But I
Sure,
mean, and I mean, there's a market. There was a market, obviously, for this album. But let me put it this way: if you put this album up against beside Equinox from Styx,
sure,
I would take Equinox
sure.
over this.
Yeah, and honestly, um, this was not, I was not their target audience at
Yeah.
this time in
Yeah.
75.
No.
And and that's not to say I go heavy in the opposite direction. I mean, I don't get any heavier than Led Zeppelin. You know,
Yeah.
I don't do I don't really care for um, the Deep Purples, the Black Sabbaths and stuff like that. Led Zeppelin is as far as I go on that. However, um, I don't. I'm somewhere in the middle, and so especially when the '80s come around, I'm looking
Yes.
for something different, and that's when I got into a lot of the classic alternative stuff. So
Yeah.
anyway, but like I said, um, there was a big audience for this. They latched onto it,
Yeah.
and after this album, he did more of the same. So
Yes.
more power
Yes.
to him.
Yes. And it should be noted this was his second to last album for Warner Brothers before he signed to Columbia. Um, at the time. So,
Yeah.
but we must carry on, ladies and gentlemen, from one end of the spectrum to another. The next album on the list that I see here, we have Hawkwind
Yeah.
with their release Warrior on the Edge of Time, released May 9th, 1975. Uh, their their fifth release, uh, boy, with a playing time of 44 minutes and 36 seconds. Uh, recorded January and March of 1975, released through United Artists in the UK, Atco in the US, and Liberty in Japan. Uh, Produced by Hawkwind. Ken, what is your view on this album?
This is what Armando you refer to as going on a journey, going on a trip. This is this is a blast of an album.
Yes.
This is according to the internet, it's the genre is psychedelic rock, progressive rock, and space rock. Yes,
Yes,
it's
yes,
all of
yes, and
those
yes.
things. It's great. It starts off with the opening track, um, Assault and Battery,
Part one. Yeah, yeah.
which is just, I'm looking at that and it's like, wow, this is strange title, which has a lot of flavor of the Moody Blues with the mellotron and the flute and all that. So I'm thinking, okay, that's what this album's going to be like.
Yeah.
It goes all over the place after this. And it really is a cross between progressive and psychedelic
It
uh,
is.
to varying degrees. And I could hear, and there's even a song in here, I can't remember which one right offhand, that as far as the vocals are concerned, it sounds like early Pink Floyd.
Mhm.
Not so much, not the instruments, but particularly the vocal harmonies, the melody, and just the mix of those vocals. So it sounds, it's all over the place, but not in a bad way.
Yeah.
Uh, if you care to partake of substances while listening to this album, this is a good album to partake of.
Yes. Um, uh, that's a good way to look at it. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's backtrack a minute. We forgot to mention, or I forgot to mention, who plays on the album. My apologies, ladies and gentlemen. We have Dave Brock on guitars, keyboards, vocals, bass guitar on one track. Nick Turner on saxophone, flute, vocals on two tracks. Lemmy Ian Kilmister, who would go on to form Motorhead, on bass guitar and vocals on one track called Motorhead. Okay. Simon House on violin, mellotron, VC, uh, is it VCS3 and
Yes.
keyboards? Sorry. Simon King and Alan Powell on drums and percussion. And everyone who follows Hawkwind, Stacia would join as dancer on stage for the band later on. But 11 tracks in total. The description of this album as being space rock, um, progressive rock, psychedelic. It fits. It fits. I did say to Ken that if I was on an acid trip, this would make sense. Um, heavy, heavy on the psychedelic vibe on this album. Um, there are some tracks where you have they're like a minute and change, and you have a spoken word in a passage that comes in, and I mentioned the wrong actor. I said Richard Chamberlain, but I kept thinking, when did Richard Burton come in
Yes.
and do the vocals on this? Um, it's not my trip. I couldn't, you know. I did want to buy at one point the box set for Space Ritual, and I'm glad I didn't, because it wouldn't have been something that I could get into. Uh, as good as the playing is on this album, there isn't really anything that I could get behind, that I
Yeah,
could grab onto.
yeah.
It's not an easy, it's not an accessible album for me to get into. So, uh, and
Well,
that's
and
me.
part of the mysticism of this album is the contributions of Michael Moorcock, who is in the realm of um, fantasy fiction, is very popular. Erica Mellenbone, uh, series like that. So I think his is the voice that comes in instead of Richard Burton on these songs,
Yeah,
and he contributed the lyrics to many of these songs too.
yeah,
So that fantasy mysticism is definitely strongly rooted, in this album. I'm not
definitely.
sure that I would visit this very often, but it's definitely a palate cleanser for me.
Ooh,
If
that's one way to
I've
put it.
listened to
Yeah.
too much, yeah, if I've listened to too much James Taylor, I might want to visit this afterwards.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, it is from one extreme to another in terms of the musical difference between James Taylor, Gorilla, and Hawkwind, Warrior on the Edge of Time,
yeah,
as night as today. And
yeah,
the reason why the reason why I asked the question, when did Richard Burton come in to do the vocals? The spoken word sections, the interludes, the vocals are delivered in a very Shakespearean kind of
yep,
way, like very thespian, you know,
yep,
I'm here, like kind of thing,
yep.
I shall recite to you and what we're gonna do here. So yeah, it's very interesting. And one little note, the track Motorhead, which features Lemmy on lead vocals, you have to get the reissued
Right.
edition to get it, because to get that track, because it's track 12
Yep.
of the album. So yeah, it's very interesting. Very interesting. Any more
Well,
comments,
I,
observations?
I, as far as early prog, um, personally, I prefer this to a lot of metal or industrial prog. Um, but there again, it depends on who the band is,
Hmm.
and probably even what stage in their career that it is. But like I said, I probably wouldn't visit this very often,
Hmm.
but it was fascinating on a first listen at least, and second listen. Whereas it's not necessarily in my wheelhouse, I'm glad it was on our list to listen to.
Yeah, yeah. No, you know what? I've been meaning to listen to some Hawkwind, and this was a good reason to listen to it. I am glad I didn't buy the set for
Sure.
Space Ritual, uh, but no, no,
Yeah.
it has its place.
Yeah.
All right, we are going all over the map with this list, ladies and gentlemen, from one extreme to another. Next up
Yeah.
on the list.
I should have gotten my neck brace.
Oh, I
Ugh,
know, I know.
whiplash,
Oh, I
musical
know.
whiplash.
Whew. Okay, from one extreme to another, we have Elton John, Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy, released May 23rd, 1975. This is his follow-up release, ninth release, his follow-up release to, I believe, Caribou. It came out in 74. With a playing time of 46 minutes and 32 seconds, it was recorded in 1974, released through DGM in the UK and MCA in the US, produced by Gus Dudgeon. Um, this album massive hit for Elton John. He was on a
Yep.
hot streak at this point. I remember reading that for albums like, for example, we're going to go back a couple of albums, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. He'd go in the studio in the morning. He'd go in on his own, come up with an arrangement for a song on piano. They would record it with the band in the afternoon. It would be done by that night. This is how fast he worked. Now, this was also shortly after the release of this album, he fired the core members of the Elton John band you know, that
Yep.
had brought him so much success. Much to the chagrin of the band members, of course, and management, but he felt that he wanted to go off in a different direction. Some would say to his detriment, some would say to his advantage. That's up for you to decide. But I will pass the virtual mic over to Ken to give his opinion on Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy.
Yeah, this was huge. This was, I think this has more in common with Goodbye Yellow Brick Road than the previous album and Rock of the Westies, which came afterwards. Um,
Terrible, yeah. Mhm.
and then I seem to remember at the time, I meant to research it, but I forgot that at the time when it was announced, it was the largest selling pre-order of any album to date.
It went platinum prior to release in terms of the orders that were received for it. Yeah.
It was an anticipated monster, and I wore my vinyl out almost literally. Um, I played the heck out of this. I liked it better than Caribou and Rock of the Westies, but it hasn't aged well for me in 50 years.
Hmm.
For a lot of these songs, he largely abandoned um, his piano as the central instrument of focus.
Yeah. Piano bass
And
driven
yeah,
track.
and so and one of the things I always loved about early Elton John was the piano aspect because he's such a phenomenal player.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of variation um, in songs and styles on this, just like Yellow Brick Road. Some work, some don't. Um,
Yeah.
shall you want to go through it track by track?
Go for it.
Okay. Um, Great title track. It starts off with that acoustic guitar. Um, it's and this album is largely biographical. I meant to put that in there
Yeah.
of him and Taupin. And this is just a great story song. This is a little piece of cinema right here. Um, I think it's one of the probably maybe even the best track off the album for me. It
Hmm.
depends on what day it is. Goes into Tower of Babel. There's some interesting soundscapes in this, but but it's not spectacular to me. Um, what do you think of the first two tracks?
Well, in my notes I have here a great acoustic guitar and mandolin use on the title track. And with Tower of Babel, there really isn't anything that stands out for me. Um, I'm just gonna say this. I do feel that this is where watching documentaries, etc., on the background on his career, I do kind of feel that maybe this is where he started to feel the pressure um, to continue the hot streak that he had with the previous albums, like with Don't Shoot Me, I'm Just a Piano Player, and Goodbye Yellow Brick Road and Caribou. I'm not, so um,
Well, yeah, and I feel that a lot of this album has to do with him dealing with stardom,
yes,
as
yes,
as is reflected in a couple of songs later. Um,
yeah,
so followed by Bitter Fingers,
yeah.
great piano intro. Um, uh, the song starts off with a nice little jig mode, and then when it gets to the chorus, it goes right into a rockin' 4/4.
Okay.
Um,
Hmm.
so there's some audible variation in that. What piano we can get out of it, I think, is very nice and makes
Yeah,
it enjoyable. Um, Bitter Fingers, as far as subject matter, it's sometimes at this point it's hard to tell how much of the lyrics are pure Bernie Taupin and how much is it maybe Bernie writing about Elton.
because you mean from observation of what he's saying about
Yeah,
what he's saying
or
for.
or yeah, or about, like I say, the album being biographical. It would, to me, leads me initially to believe it's biographical about both of them
Yeah,
because
yeah.
they were so tight at the hip, when
Well,
it
I
came to
mean,
songwriting.
yeah, and at this point they were on a roll.
Yeah,
I mean, they Elton needed to produce music, needed to produce product for management, for John Reed Enterprises, and for the record companies um, that released the album. So I tend to think that at this point, for him, the cracks started to show.
yes,
Whereas Bernie Taupin has said in interviews that he loved being on tour at this point. He loved
yes,
the touring life and everything that it welcomed him or enabled him to do, women song, whatever.
sure,
Um, and yeah, I do believe that a good amount of these songs, if not all of them, are autobiographical.
yes,
I mean, with this song, "Someone Saved My Life Tonight," um, classic song, and it's been well touted that he um, thanked Long John Baldry for
mhm,
saving his life in
yep,
terms of him wanting to get married.
yep,
And Long John Baldry said, "What are you doing?
yeah,
Like, you're making a mistake. You're not going to be happy.
yeah,
She's not going to be happy. And it's not fair to her or you with what you want to do. So why are you doing this?"
sure,
And with the lyrics, "You almost got your hooks in me, did you, dear?" I mean, you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah,
okay, that's a hit and a half for in the ass for the woman that he's talking about. You know what I mean? So
sure.
yeah, no, yeah, that's I. I mean, if you have any more to say, please cut in.
Well,
Cut in.
that covers, yeah, that covers that song very, very well. I mean, um, it doesn't get much more personal than that.
Yeah.
Um, one interesting song that really caught my attention was the track "Tell Me When the Whistle Blows." That is uh,
Track four. Yeah.
neat. Yeah, it is the um, first cousin to Philadelphia Freedom. I mean, this is a good touch of Philly Blue-Eyed Soul. Um,
Okay.
Not quite as much as Philadelphia Freedom, but it's got that feel, that instrumentation with those strings in the background. Um, uh, the lyrics are, they serve their purpose, but
Yeah.
it's just such a mood breaker, a palate cleanser, for the middle of the album
Yeah.
because it's just so different. And then, of course, that's followed by Someone Save My Life, followed by Meal Ticket, which is, it's not a bad rocker.
Hmm.
It's really not. like I said, a lot of these, a lot of Taupin's lyrics are, um, I don't want to say they're out there, but sometimes the meanings either aren't really obvious
Yeah, they're not
or they're
crystal
just
clear. Yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay,
I get
got to
it.
get a meal ticket. Got to get me some food stamps or whatever.
Yeah,
He was a poet that whose poetry was put to music. Um, Followed by Better Off Dead, which is musically it's fascinating with its mix of rhythmic patterns.
the only note I have for Better Off Dead is unique piano arrangement.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and uh, it's not just a straight 4/4,
yeah,
typical rocker. Rhythmically, both musically and the way the instruments are arranged, um, it's it's just very fascinating musically.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and the lyrics, "You're better off dead if you haven't yet died." It's like, not quite sure what to do with that. There again, I question a lot of these songs, not just "Someone Save My Life," with Elton dealing with um, such huge success
inner
in his
demons. Yeah,
personal life,
yeah.
and then it comes to "We All Fall in Love Sometimes,"
Hmm.
um, which is a little ballad that feels more in the vein of Blue Moves, his Blue Moves album.
Yeah.
It's a nice little ballad, but it's just for me, it's just like, no, okay.
Okay.
Uh,
And that segues into the final track, Curtains,
yeah,
which we should say that on initial CD pressings, Curtains, We All Fall in Love Sometimes, and Curtains were listed as track nine, as one track,
yes,
because they segued into one another.
that's right.
Yeah.
And rightfully so, as far as styles.
Hmm.
Um, it just kind of makes sense. It's a two-song medley.
Hmm.
The only thing about Curtains, um, I appreciate towards the end of it the vocal overdubs and the layers that it does, but it just runs a little bit too long. It it
Okay.
it becomes a little bit of a dirge for me,
Okay.
and so I'm likely to hit the stop button before this song ends.
Okay.
But like I said, when the album came out, I just played it over and over and over and over
Okay.
again.
Yeah.
But it's a product of 1970 mid 70s for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, for me, I've known of the album obviously for years. I've never sat and listened to it. I need to I need to sit with it more. There have been, I mean, reissue, excuse me, reissues upon reissues, and on the reissues you have uh, his version of "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds" that he
Right,
did with John Lennon, and
right.
which people bought more copies of it. I think that for me at this point in time, like with songs like "Got to Get a Meal Ticket," "Start Stop Side 2," to me that's sort of okay. Bernie may have meant one thing, but for me, that's kind of like out may have taken it, may have taken it as sorry about my southern accent. It's he may have taken that song as okay. I've got this corporation that I'm dealing with that
Yeah,
this the responsibility of putting food in the mouths of all these people that are in my employ. What
sure,
am I doing here? What have I done? What
sure,
have I signed on for?
sure.
And the weight and the gravity of all that, right? So he may be thinking of that. So again, I need to, it's a good album.
Mhm,
I need to sit with it some more.
mhm.
I really do wish, I don't know if there's, I don't know if there's ever been a definitive box set released of this.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think there needs to be, because then I would obviously sink my teeth into it more and sit with it, and But I mean, I do mean on the scale of, uh, who's next in Lifehouse. I mean on that scale because whether if there's enough material for that.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's the question. Yeah.
yeah, but again, good album. Is it as good as previous? The jury for me is still on that one, but I need to sit with it some more.
Sure.
It's better than Victim of Love. Let's put it that way. Um, I'll go on record. There are certain artists that should not release disco albums. Ethel
Take
Merman,
that to the bank. Yeah.
Anne Margaret, and Elton John. Okay, but we must carry on, ladies and gentlemen. Our
Yeah.
last album that we are going to be discussing is Paul McCartney and Wings, or Wings, with Venus and Mars, released May 27th, 1975, through Capitol Records, the band's fourth release, recorded November 5th to the 13th of 74, and January and February 20th of 1975, produced by Paul McCartney, with a playing time of 43 minutes and 10 seconds. Virtual mic back over to Ken with his view on Venus and Mars.
Historically, I think it's fascinating that this song or this album was released within the same week as the Elton John song album. Um, Elton John, I think, was May 23rd, and this was May 27th. It's like holy cow! And
Yeah.
and there's other albums in '75 that we're not covering. We just narrowed it down to these five. Um, Venus and Mars, I think, is a great follow up to Band on the Run. Band on the
Mhm.
Run is my favorite Wings album, and this comes up as number two,
Mhm.
in my list. They would go on to release albums that I just couldn't sit through. Um, but this one has just got some really great tracks on it. One of their best. McCartney is in phenomenal voice
Mhm.
in this album. I mean, he's never sounded better. And I think the maturity of his voice at this time from say his Beatles days,
Yeah.
he's the same range, but there's just a little bit more richer tone and timbre to his voice on this
Mhm.
stuff. Um, the whole album has great guitars, which is highlighted immediately on the opening track, which is only what, a minute? Yeah, a minute 16.
Yeah.
Song Venus and Mars, a minute 16. And those guitars on here, the 12 string and the 6 string acoustics,
Yeah.
just just incredible. And like McCartney is want to do, just go straight on into the rocking um, song rock show.
Yeah.
He was doing a lot of touring at this time. A lot of these songs from this album I was familiar with more from the Triple Live album
Yeah.
that he put out.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, before I was going to get a sip of coffee, but you stopped me dead in my tracks.
The track,
The majority of the tracks that appeared on this album also appeared on the follow-up live album, Wings Over America, which was a massive triple disc set, or a double cassette
yeah,
set, that was released in 1976. Wings Over America contained 28 songs, massive for the time. And
great album.
uh, yeah, yeah. So back to my sip of coffee.
Yeah, it
Continue.
really showed. Yeah, the live album, it
It did.
really showed off the live sound and what his band was able to do live. In some ways, even some of the songs sound better live than on this album, but I'll
Yes.
still take the album cuts. like I say, rock show, it just shines like crazy. It's such a good rocker. Um,
Yes. And
uh,
just not to interject to cut in, but I will. We should go through and I failed to mention this again. My apologies, but we should go through who appears on the album.
yes,
You have, obviously Paul McCartney on lead vocals, bass guitars, keyboards, piano, and percussion. Linda McCartney on keyboards, backing vocals, and percussion. Denny Lane on lead vocals on Spirits of Ancient Egypt, vocals and guitars, keyboards, and percussion. Those three made up the core of what was Wings at the time of
yeah,
1973 of the
yeah,
recording and release of Band on the Run. You have also joining him on this release, you have Jimmy McCullough on
yeah,
guitars and lead vocals on Medicine Jar, vocals and percussion, Joe English on drums and percussion,
yeah,
Jeff Britton on drums on Love and Song, Letting Go, and Medicine Jar. Also joining uh, the band, you have Kenneth Williams on congas on Rock Show, Alan Tucson on piano on Rock Show, Dave Mason, blast from the
yep,
not too distant past at that point with guitar on Listen to What the Man Said, and Tom Scott on soprano saxophone and Listen to What the Man Said.
mhm.
So back to our regular schedule program. Ken?
Yeah, and you've got Denny Lane and Jimmy McCullough both on guitars.
Yeah,
Holy cow! Uh,
yeah, yeah.
Joe English on drums, who's not a snooze fest either.
No.
Um, I was surprised. I didn't realize Alan Toussaint played, piano on Rock Show. More power to him.
Yeah, I know, and that name was familiar to me too. And I read that I was like Alan Tucson, really? Like
Yeah,
you know, um, and it's got to be said too. Paul McCartney at this point, and then I will shut up. I promise. Paul McCartney at this point was facing what I would consider to be tremendous pressure with proving that he could move on past the Beatles, and his main objective with Wings was to have a full-fledged band. He didn't want, you know,
right.
he didn't want to have to be fronting the band with a supporting cast of musicians behind him. He wanted a full-fledged band with contributions in writing and singing and playing from uh, from the other musicians in the band, Denny Lane and Jimmy McCullough.
Yeah,
So, and Joe English at the time. I mean,
yeah,
originally Jeff Britton was hired on, but there was friction between him and McCartney. So he left, and then he brought in Joe English, who auditioned and got the gig to be a part of the band. He wanted everybody in the band to contribute and have it be a full-fledged band. The problem with that was every interview that he did was met up with opposition from and criticism from critics, journalists, and reporters saying, you know, why don't you get back together with the Beatles? Well, you know what?
yeah,
The Beatles are over.
yeah,
We're done. That isn't going to happen. And then I will shut up. During their stop in Australia for this tour, he was met up with a journalist or a reporter who said, "You're 33 years old. Why don't you retire? Don't you think you're too old for this?" And he goes, "Well, you know what? You come to the show and then you tell me what you think."
yeah.
"Well, I think you're too old for this." "Well, that's your opinion." Gets in his car and he drives away. Like, how much pressure can or criticism can somebody really put up with? Do you know what I mean? Like, it was insurmountable. But
Sure.
you know, um,
Add on top of that, trying to prove that Ben on the Run wasn't a fluke.
exactly. Or Rose, the previous album before that, or Ram. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, because I mean, coming out of the Beatles and wanting to continue with the legend of the Beatles that
Yes.
maybe not so much that they created, but the media created about the Beatles.
Yes.
Because I think that the idea of the Beatles was played up a lot more in the minds of the fans than from the Beatles themselves.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? It's the perception of it.
Yes.
But I'm sorry, I cut you off. I went on
No.
a rampage, on a tangent and a rampage kind of a thing. But you know, I my personal view on this album, I think it's great.
Yes.
I think it's great. I think it has a beginning, a middle, and an ending. I mean, side one starts off with the, Venus and Mars. A minute 16, it segues into the Fantastic Rock Show, where live it clocks in at like over 10 minutes and 20 seconds. Um, with songs like, You Gave Me the Answer, uh, Magneto and Titanium Man, Letting Go. Fantastic, just very energetic, melodic pop rock. Side two starts off with uh, Venus and Mars reprise. So that's, bit of an ending to that story. And then it goes into Spirits of Ancient Egypt and Medicine Jar, where you've got Denny Lane and Jimmy McCullough taking over the vocals. So there you have
Yes.
McCartney wanting to, have everyone involved, be being, full-fledged band. And, listen to what the man said. Come on. I mean,
Yeah.
Jim has already gushed over his admiration for this song and how much he loves it. And I got to agree,
Yeah.
just a really well crafted pop song, pop rock song.
Yeah.
And I don't mean
Mhm.
to diminish it by calling it a pop song.
Right.
Uh, and yeah, you know, treat her gently, great, lonely old people. I mean,
Mhm.
and it ends off with Crossroads. I mean, for like a minute. So again, it has
Yes.
a
Literally.
good hmm? Sorry.
Literally. A minute. Literally.
A minute, exactly, a minute flat. So it has a big. What I like about albums is when they have a beginning, a middle, and an ending, right? So there is a common thread going on here in terms of themes, but it's not a concept album per se.
Right.
But I think it's a good, strong follow-up to uh, Band on the Run from '73. So
Yeah, and it sounds like they're having a really great time with this album.
yeah,
And like you mentioned, Spirits of Ancient Egypt and Medicine Jar, sung by uh, the two other band members, that doesn't mean they're any less better than the other songs on it. They're very
no,
good songs. Um, but yeah, and I love the playful songs like Magneto and Titanium Man. It reminds me a lot of Bullet Brain and Cactus Head by Split Ends
okay,
and Pineapple Head by Crowded House. It's just got that, the visuals it brings to mind is just whether it's a comic book or whatever. It's just it's just such a fun song.
yeah,
And the vocals, the background vocals are excellent. The horn work of the horn section on this album is fantastic. I mean, Letting Go, really nice,
yeah,
really nice guitars and horn section. Um, uh, and the same with it, Call Me Back Again. The horns just really knock it out.
yeah, yeah. I
And
think. Yeah, I think that at this point in time, McCartney, like so many other bands in his 70s, was on a hot streak in terms
yeah,
of album releases. And he just went with it. He
yeah,
just went with it. You could see in interviews and the way he interacted with everybody that they enjoyed what they were doing. He was, you know, he was living his life
Yes,
and enjoying it. What is wrong with that?
yes,
You know, I just in closing, and then I will shut up, ladies and gentlemen. I tend to think that the media and the public in general, the media or the media in particular, tend to want to beat down a successful, you know, pop rock
right.
star or anyone that's enjoying success. I mean, we tend to build them up in our minds, you know, but when we don't see what the when we don't see what we think they should be doing, we tend to beat them down. You know what I mean? And he wasn't going to have any of that at
Yeah.
this point in time.
Well, the press back then is the same as social media now. Um, for now, a lot of people online is whatever will get the most clicks. For back then, it was whatever sold the most, Rolling Stone magazines or Cream magazine or newspapers.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's
So,
exactly it.
and a lot of time they didn't know what they were talking about or were strictly um, reflecting on their own
Yeah.
personal biases.
Yeah. No,
Just like
I
now, nothing ever
completely.
changes.
Exactly. Exactly. No, I agree with you 100%. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Albums that are celebrating their 60th and 50th um, anniversaries. Please put down in the comments after watching this extended, lengthy episode your opinions on the albums that we covered in this episode, and put down what your favorite albums are from these particular artists that we talked about.
Yeah.
Again,
Which one did we leave out that you love?
exactly, exactly. Again, we are not experts on music in any shape, form, or fashion. We are just telling you what we think and giving you our opinion, and we welcome yours. Okay.
Absolutely.
So, again, I want to thank Ken for coming with me on this uh, extended musical ride for this episode. And we will be back next time with albums celebrating their 30th anniversaries. We also will be back with a special live album spotlight, Sinatra at the Sands. So please stay tuned for that. It's going to be amazing. Okay. So please click like and subscribe and do hit the notification bell to keep yourselves on top of any new content that we've got coming up. We've got more shows that we're working on. I've got more shows that I'm doing with Bill Schuster. We're doing a series. We're doing two series, Tripping Through the 70s, which is coming up. And we're also in the middle of recording Running Back Through the 80s, where we both, in each set of episodes, look back at our top five tracks from the years 70 to 79 and the years 80 to 89. Five top tracks plus two honorable mentions. That's coming up. And yeah, more shows to do, more ideas to formulate and put together, and we'll bring them to you as soon as we possibly can. All right, please look after yourselves and one another, and we'll see you soon with Sinatra at the Sands. Bye for now.